But the Kennedys, Rockefellers, and their super-rich Confederates are not being hypocrites in advocating socialism. It appears to be a contradiction for the super-rich to work for socialism and the destruction of free enterprise. In reality, it is not. Our problem is that most of us believe socialism is what socialists want us to believe it is, a share the wealth program. That is the theory. But is that how it works? Let us examine the only socialist countries according to the socialist definition of the word, extant in the world today. These are the communist countries. The communists themselves refer to these as socialist countries, as in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Here, in the reality of socialism, we have a tiny oligarchical clique at the top, usually numbering no more than 3% of the total population, controlling the total wealth, total production, and the very lives of the other 97%. Certainly, even the most naive observe that Mr. Brezhnev, I guess that was the Russian leader at the time, doesn't live like one of the poor peasants out on the great Russian steppes. But according to socialist theory, he is supposed to do just that. If one understands that socialism is not a share the wealth program, but it is in reality a method to consolidate and control the wealth, then the seeming paradox of the super-rich men promoting socialism becomes no paradox at all. Instead, it becomes logical. Even the perfect tool of power-seeking megalomaniacs, communism, is more accurately socialism. It is not a movement of the downtrodden masses, but of the economic elite. The plan of the conspirator insiders, then, is to socialize the United States, not to communize it. How is this to be accomplished? Chart 3 shows the structure of our government established by our founding fathers. The Constitution fractionalized and subdivided governmental power in every way possible. The founding fathers believed that each branch of the government, whether at the federal, state, or local level, would be jealous of its powers, and would never surrender them to centralized control. Also, many phases of our lives, such as charity and education, were put totally or almost totally out of the grasp of politicians. Under this system, you could not have a dictatorship. No segment of the government could possibly amass enough power to form a dictatorship. In order to have a dictatorship, one must have a single branch holding most of the reins of power. Once you have this, a dictatorship is inevitable. A dictatorship was impossible in our republic because power was widely diffused. Today, as we approach democratic socialism, all power is being centralized at the apex of the executive branch of the federal government. This concentration of power makes a dictatorship inevitable. Those who control the president indirectly gain virtual control of the whole country. The English philosopher Thomas Hobbes noted, "Freedom is government divided into small fragments." Woodrow Wilson, before he became a tool of the insiders, observed, "This history of liberty is a history of the limitations of governmental power, not the increase of it." And the English historian Lord Acton commented, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." Even though these men lived after our Constitution was written, our forefathers understood these principles completely. But what is happening today? As we move leftward along the political spectrum towards socialism, all the reins of power are being centralized in the executive branch of the federal government. Much of this is being done by buying with legislation or with free federal grants all the other entities. Money is used as bait, and the hook is federal control. The Supreme Court has ruled, and in this case quite logically, that it is hardly lack of due process for the government to regulate that which it subsidizes. If you and your clique wanted control over the United States, it would be impossible to take over every city hall, county seat, and state house. You would want all power vested at the apex of the executive branch of the federal government. Then you would only have to control one man to control the whole shebang. If you wanted to control the nation's manufacturing, commerce, finance, transportation, and natural resources, you would need only to control the apex, the power pinnacle of an all-powerful socialist government. Then you would have a monopoly and could squeeze out all your competitors. If you wanted a national monopoly, you must control a national socialist government. If you want a worldwide monopoly, you must control a world socialist government. That is what the game is all about. Communism is not a movement of the downtrodden masses, but a movement created, manipulated, and used by power-seeking billionaires in order to gain control over the world. First by establishing socialist governments in the various nations, and then consolidating them all through a great merger into an all-powerful world socialist superstate, probably under the auspices of the United Nations. The balance of this book will outline just how they have used communism to approach that goal. Yeah, we did it.
There we go.
2. Alright. So we understand that they use socialism as a good philosophy for all the lazy, all the fluoride heads, all the zombies out there.
I am in fact a fluoride head.
You all are. Who's not? They tell us that socialism is what's going to save us all, so we don't have to just make decisions in the future. And we're like, okay, it's inevitable. And first you make it happen in a bunch of different countries, and then you just merge them all together, and then you have a world government. And you can all act like whoever's watching this, like it's not happening in America, but you're just a zombie if you don't see this happening. If you're looking at politics like the conservatives and the Republicans have different philosophies, you are a zombie, and you're not watching this because I don't know how you stumbled on a video like this.
Yeah, by mistake for sure.
So, any further comments?
Stay tuned next week for Chapter 3, The Money Manipulators.
The money Oh, there's one important thing I wanted to show the people.
Oh, Chart 3?
Yeah. This
Very
chart
good chart.
shows how a constitutional republic is set up with the federal government and then state governments under it and a whole bunch of different branches. And then outside of the federal government and the state governments are charity, police, and education. See, those aren't supposed to be attached to government. And then outside of even the federal and state government over on this side, labor, finance, and business. So the finance is not supposed to be under the federal government. It's not supposed to be under the government. If you let the government control the finances,
and then control the water and the food,
then they'll control everything. And then under the democratic socialism, the executive branch is God. Everything falls under them. There is no way around it. And
so what about the title, the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, it's just to trick you to think it's a private bank that they set up that loans money to our government.
And everywhere else
everywhere else in the world. But we'll get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Concord Press.